First, do you guys know if your languages already have dictionaries? Well, I mean, regardless, we're going to make one. So if you have one, you still have to make one with us. But it's really important for languages to have dictionaries. So why should we make dictionaries? First, a dictionary and lexicon is useful for both community members and non-community members who want to either learn the language or just learn about the language. A lot of times they have a lot of front material and back material, which gives like a sketch grammar and just various demographic information about the language. So it's really useful to a very wide variety of people. It's also great for pedagogical uses. I mean, most of you probably use a dictionary at some point in your school career for classroom sort of activities. It's also useful for us as linguists and other scholars who want to work with or speak the language. It both helps us learn it, helps us learn stuff about it, how roots sort of work and various types of morphology, what parts of speech there are. And always it adds prestige to a language. A language without a dictionary is often, the speakers think that it's not as prestigious as it of course is, because it's perfectly valid as a language. And there's a lot of politics surrounding that kind of thing, about which language you can translate it into, if the area has been colonized, because you don't necessarily want to use the colonizer's language, even if it's the more widely used language of that area. Maybe you want to use English instead. But that's one of the major factors. Also, do you guys use print dictionaries at all still? Just out of curiosity.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Every day.
Every day. I like it, I like it. Well, just without going into it too much, there's a huge amount of difference between print dictionaries and online dictionaries and how you format them and the kinds of things you should use to make them and think about in terms of space organization and stuff. Ours is all set because we're using a program that does dictionary formation for you, basically. And you can mess with it a little bit, but not that much. But just so you know, in case you want to go forth and make bigger dictionaries, online formatting is very useful. So, does anybody want to volunteer anything as to what the useful parts of a dictionary are? What the kind of things you have to have in order for it to qualify as a dictionary?
Words.
Words! So you have to have head words. I don't know if it's going to come on all at once. Head words. You have to have
Pronunciation.
pronunciation. So that's usually an IPA. We worked with IPA earlier, so that, you know, it's sort of a standardized way of writing how the word sounds, even if it's not written like that, like English. Terrible, terrible example. Parts of speech, so noun, adjective, what it's used for, that part can be tricky, as you'll find out as you do this yourself, I'm sure. And very, very importantly, example sentences. Because as we know, translations are not always one-to-one. You can't have, it's not used the same way or something, so example sentences are really important to kind of get across more of how you would use this word. Just knowing it isn't enough to actually have learned it. And there are some other things that I didn't put on here, which are like etymology, if you happen to know the etymology of a word, where it came from, what its history was, what it was formed from. There's some really interesting ones in English, like apron was originally napron, and it got reanalyzed because it was an apron, so a napron. We just decided it was an apron because it always had an N. Anyway, so funny things like that you can include in your dictionary. Also, domains of use. If it's not like a widely used everyday word, like, I don't know, house. If you have something that's like just for liturgical purposes, so used in the church, or things that are archaic and aren't used anymore, so it exists and we know it's a word, but no one says this anymore. Or if it's slang, like, be careful when you want to use this, because it might be a bad thing. Some people might get mad at you. And also, cross-referencing. So if you have a word that's only used in the context of another word or is part of an idiom, and you don't really know where to put it because an idiom is a whole phrase and you don't want to cross-reference it with the if it starts with the, because that doesn't mean anything to anyone. So that helps you find things in other parts of the dictionary. Also, paradigms. If your language has a lot of suppletive things or like principal parts or something, it's really useful to include some sort of paradigmatic information, how you conjugate it, and all of the different forms it can come in, so people can find it if they see it in a form that's not the one that is actually the head word. Cool? Cool. Okay. So, a little bit about types of dictionaries and organization. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with the alphabetical model, where you have A, B, C, D, all the words that start with A, all the words that start with B, and that's how it goes. And you can find it alphabetically because everybody knows the alphabet, presumably, so you know your word starts with B, you look for B. Very easy. However, this is not a great model for all types of dictionaries or all languages. Another model is those organized by root, which linguists end up using a lot, actually. And one especially prominent example is the Semitic languages. If anybody knows anything about Semitic languages, their morphology and their derivational morphology is all word internal. So their roots are 3 consonants, like KTB, for instance, and then you get vowels inserted into it as how to make it. So kiteb is book, KTB. Kutub is books. Ektub is I write. See how it goes? So if you want to talk about the verb, you can't look up something that starts with I because the root doesn't actually start with I. You know, so you have to know how to look for it. So here's just one example from Arabic. This is alam, which is usually the root for like learning and things, but there are a bunch of sub-entries, which are actually words like head words, I guess. They are the actual head words, but they're all organized under the category of this root. So you get things like alam, sign, token, mark, badge, ailam, which is tender, or a well, which is abundant with water, or a sea. Don't ask me why those go together. This is just how it is. Ma'alama, which is an encyclopedia. Ya'lam is notification or advice. And alam, which is the world, universe, or the cosmos. And you can tell that these are not necessarily semantically related to each other, but you have to find them by their root because they don't necessarily start always with I right there. Yeah, makes sense? So if your language is sort of like this, you might want to consider this type of organization. Okay, the last is a thematic one, where words are grouped by semantic domain, more or less, which makes it easier to compile it because you can kind of sit there and think about all the words that pertain to one specific subject and get it all down, and then move on to the next subject and have it organized by topic, like that. However, there are some problems with this, mainly that you tend to miss things, because not every word fits cleanly into a particular semantic domain, and it's also sometimes hard to find things, because if you don't necessarily, you're thinking of a topic and it's not one of the ones that happens to be in the index, you're like, where do I find this? So, yes. Also, lexicography just kind of seems pretty straightforward, right? You have a word and you translate it, you write down what it means, and you give an example from your language, right? Most of it is that easy. But there are some things that should be looked out for, one of which is various types of homophony. So there are things that are often clearly related, yet they have different parts of speech, or sometimes even the same part of speech, and yet they should not be one head word, probably. Depends on how you look at it. I tend to think they shouldn't be one head word. So there are clearly things like pound, like you have a pound of flour, or you pound on something. Those are very semantically different. I don't know if they have a common origin or not, or if they're at all related. But you would probably put those as 2 different words, right? In your dictionary, you have a word for the noun and one for the verb. But there are some that are a little weirder because one was clearly derived from the other. So like, there's a crow, but crows crow, right? And nothing really crows but a crow. So the verb came from the noun, presumably. So do you make that one entry, like a sub-entry of the verb is derived from the noun, or are those just 2 completely different things? Same with Google, which is a newer example, but you don't Google things in Bing, right? I don't think you can do that. You just Google things in Google. Also, you can get divisions based on grammatical properties, which is tougher to find and tougher to realize often. So, English is sort of a terrible example because we have no derivational morphology, but write, as in he writes, he is writing, it can be intransitive, right? He writes a book, can be transitive. I write a letter to you, can be ditransitive, or if you want to talk about it in terms of semantics instead of formal structure, it's monovalent, bivalent, or trivalent. Do these all get their own entry or not? Because they are not structurally the same. It's up for you to decide when you make your dictionary, right? English obviously deals with this as one, but if your language makes clear distinctions between these categories and different types of transitivity, you might want to consider making them 2 entries. Okay. Also, multiple senses and definitions. It is actually pretty rare that a word has literally only one meaning. We all kind of know this. You sit around and think about it. You know, you can imagine a context where the word means something else, or at least slightly something else. So the way we have it set up where you get a one-to-one correspondence is somewhat artificial, and just realize that. And if you want to expand upon your dictionary, you'll need to add probably multiple meanings. So this is impress, a verb. So you know about impress, like to press into something. To affect deeply in mind or feelings. I took these from dictionary.com, by the way. I did not make them up. Their example sentence for this was, he impressed us as a sincere young man. Probably not the most common meaning. To fix ideas or facts firmly in memory. Example, to impress the importance of honesty on a child. That's a little more common. To urge, as for something remembered or to be done. She impressed the need for action upon them. To impose a quality or characteristic. The painter impressed his love of garish colors upon the landscape. Okay, sure. And then the archaic one, which is my favorite, to force into service on a seafaring vessel, like the British during the Revolutionary War were impressing American soldiers upon their ships. So yes, it can have a variety of meaning and a variety of contexts. Just keep that in mind when you're building your entries. So, lastly, this is kind of what I was talking about with needing to provide as much information as you can imagine would be necessary to use the word properly. So, if you think about English, what's the past tense of go? Went, right? If you are reading a text and you're not a native speaker of English and you find went, how are you going to know to look it up under go in the dictionary? So you need to make your irregular forms very findable in your sources too. So even though it's related, you need to say it's related and then cross-reference it to another entry, right? So for instance, ancient Greek has 6 principal parts, and if you know European languages, they're kind of known for having lots of suppletive forms for different tenses / aspects. So lambano is the present, lepsomai, future, elabon imperfect, elepha, the aorist or the completive, it's a Greekist term. Elemai or elephthane for the pluperfect. And you can see that each of these does not directly correlate. Like you can't take off a prefix or a suffix and you see exactly what the root is, right? They don't match up perfectly with each other. So yes, I would consider all of this information absolutely necessary when you look up lambano, to knowing how to use it and how to conjugate it and use it in various contexts. So, if your language has suppletive forms, include them in the entry, please. Okay, which finally brings us to we say in creating our own dictionaries. So, does anybody have we say already downloaded? Yeah? Yes? No? Yes? Nod or shake your head at me. No? You have it?
You
wouldn't have it on your Mac.
Right, because I will have it for you on my computer. Do you have we say yet, Andrew?
Did you download it?
Okay, well, okay, so there's a link on your handout. It says http://wesay.also.org. So go there and click on PC and then you can go right through the process. It's very normal. Cool, so if you have we say, please click it now.
Or like with your mentors, you'll go through this whole handout as well. So if you just kind of want to run through some of the things
Okay.
you'll be doing on WeSay.
Sure. Okay. So when you get in, you're going to create a new project, presumably. You're going to look for your language in the choose language menu. If it's not there, you can type it in. There's a code QAA for unidentified language or something like that. There. Okay. And then you see these different fields across the top. There's tasks, input systems, fields, actions, interface language, backup, and option lists. You're just going to click through each of these, and the handout tells you which boxes need to be clicked. So for this one, you need to do dictionary meanings, parts of speech, example sentences, and gather words by semantic domain. And you'll just click through each one. So input systems, you need to make sure that you have your language. You'll see English, of course, English, and then you'll add voice right there so that you could add little recordings of the words next to the head word, which is really useful too. Okay. Fields, that's basically the same thing. You just want to make sure that the input systems here are clicked in so that they'll appear in your dictionary. And this is the kind of slightly more complicated part. This is how you're gonna, I guess, save and send off your dictionary eventually. So you want to back up to USB, and you want to email this dictionary to someone. And then this is what you'll get, and you fill in that information. And this is so LDTC can eventually get what you put into your dictionary and put it on your website. You also want send, receive, and open in Lexicon Pro. Good? Okay. And then you get to the actual part where you get to enter words. Yay! So you'll get this sort of screen where you get browse and edit, meanings, parts of speech, example sentences. This bar will tell you how much is completed of each. You can go to browse and edit, and you can just right away start entering words into a format that looks kind of like this. So you get your word, you have a drop-down menu where you can pick part of speech. Often the part of speech you want will not be in the drop-down, so I think you have to pick unknown or something if it's not there, but it's okay, don't worry about it. And then you record the meaning. You have the little red button right there. If you just click on it, you can record straight from the computer, and then turn it off and you can listen to it and make sure it's fine. And there's a space that you can't see on this for example sentences a little farther down. Aha! There you go, meaning. Oh, and here's how you enter by semantic domains. Can we enter by semantic domain?
Mm-hmm, we can.
Okay. So if you want to enter by semantic domain, click on the semantic domain tab, and you can enter words this way just really fast. Enter all the words you can think of and then go back and define them, because it'll tell you where you're missing meanings and parts of speech and things. This is a good way to just brainstorm what words you want in your dictionary. Okay, so go forth with your mentors and make dictionaries. You need 25 entries for us, and they need to have example sentences and parts of speech, and you know, the accompanying information, nothing terribly fancy. And we have very little time left. So if you don't manage to finish it today, there will be time to work on it later, but if you still have stuff to do after that, then you probably need to make time with your mentors to work on it outside the workshop. So, questions, comments? Next week we're doing revitalization. Woo! Yeah, and it's the last workshop, guys. It's so sad. It went so fast.
Next week, I know. All right, yeah. Thank you so much, Raina. Excellent presentation on dictionary making. So yeah, so with your mentors now, my advice is just to poke around. You guys work together on configuring your dictionary first. That's going to take the most amount of time. If you have any questions, ask me. I can pull up WeSay and we can go through the process together. And then once you've configured your dictionary, it's pretty easy to add entries. My recommendation, because you're going to make a very small dictionary of only 25 entries, my recommendation is to think about making a thematic dictionary, what Raina talked about, where you think about one theme, think about sort of like a subject area or an idea that maybe kind of relates to your culture, and then try to come up with a lot of words about that. And if you need a little bit of help coming up with a subject or a theme, then go to the semantic domains and try to find something that interests you. So that's my suggestion, but you know, make this dictionary yours and do what you would like to do.
We create like a program to support. Yeah. But it's huge.
Right, yeah. Yeah, which is fine, like if that's what you want to be your overarching goal. You just have to think about ways to start small, to think about putting together a plan that's more doable, starting with 1 or 2 families, and then learning from that, and then expanding it, or working to develop materials, like lists of words to use and not to use in the kitchen, or while you're cooking food and things like that. And that way, if the mother and father don't have such a strong command on it, then it helps them too, and they know which things they can work towards. And stuff like that. I think it's a good idea. And it's fine to hope for something that large, but you just have to be aware about starting small and building up.
Yeah, maybe like some pilot project or.
Yeah, we're working with like 1 or 2.
but I'm just kind of anxious to hear what you thought about for your own language and your own community, and then we'll sort of change gears a little bit. So let's start with Gigi.
I'll just share one.
Sure.
I'm very interested in helping create a Bisaya material, especially that it will be used as a medium of instruction in we are using a multilingual medium of instruction in the Philippines, and when I Googled, there is really no Cebuano variety of the language. There is no Bisaya that is in Cagayan de Oro, only a Cebuano variety in the Visayas, so no variety for Mindanao. So I was thinking that if I could gather a list of words, put them down in context, and that could help even just a particular level for a start. And somebody else could use that pattern in creating these for a different level using their own structure.
Absolutely, yeah. So just get started putting some materials out there, and then it can probably be used in a number of different ways for a number of different sort of programs. Yeah, awesome idea.
Yeah, because the problem, in my case, the problem is I don't live anymore in the province where I grew, that is in Pangasinan. So basically, I'm already living in the city, in Baguio City, where we don't really speak Pangasinan. And so the things that I'm thinking is that since we have maintained this Facebook account with alumni from Pangasinan, so I'm thinking of revitalizing our way of communicating through our language, through Pangasinan. So that's one way. And then another thing is in our campus, we have this organization that is an organization for Pangasinan students. We call it Subol Society. So I am thinking of giving a seminar to them and then to make them aware about the status of our language, so that way they can enrich their interest in our language. And then the last one is for me to like what you've said earlier, we set aside a day where we can talk with my language, and then another day where we can talk using my husband's language, because we speak different language. He's speaking Ilocano, I'm speaking Pangasinan. That's why when we communicate with our kids, we speak through Tagalog or Filipino. So we set aside a day for speaking Pangasinan, a day for speaking Ilocano, and other days for Filipino. So those are my ideas.
Those are great ideas. I think that sounds great. Yeah, I think bring up a good point that a lot of times it just needs to start by getting the word out there. So giving a talk and just kind of alerting people to what the issue is.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to gain some support. I also think, we don't talk enough about people who move away from where they grew up and trying to keep the language in use in a city. And it's really cool that you talked about already Facebook and kind of how technology plays a role in that.
I think it's better to practice speaking because we moved to the city since we were young, so we don't tend to speak the dialect. So I think we better start. I'd love to start with my brothers, my family in the kitchen, and maybe we can go out. Like my parents, they tend to take us to participate in a traditional ceremony where the place everyone have to speak the dialect. So the often we go more participating, I think we can be fluent in speaking the dialect.
Definitely. I think you're smart to think about how to start small with your own family, build kind of like a tradition among your own family, and then as a family, build it and build it. They're very smart.
The first one is there is like an idea how to conduct an Chinese culture event, like dance performance or poetry and Chinese song, something like that, how the people can speak and can hear the Chinese. And the second one is provide the children with Chinese book and hear the Chinese song, and also to educate them with Chinese TV show maybe. And the last one is develop like one program, like pilot project. Okay, let's say I can call it like Chinese from home. Yeah, begin with a small family. Yeah, maybe if to talk the 1 or 2 family, and the parent can have the children to speak the Chinese or to write the Chinese. That's why if the program going better, and then we can implement it to the other family.
Yeah, those are excellent ideas. I think you bring up 2 really important aspects of revitalization. One is to include culture, right? Like song and dance. And the other is to, really focus on children. So I think that sounds great. And you're kind of a little bit ahead of me even, because the next thing I wanted to talk about, sort of beyond LDTC and what you can do now that you've sort of gone through our very, very small training. Because this is our last session. It makes me so sad. But, LDTC is maybe kind of winding down for us, the mentors, but for you, the participants, feel free to eat. For you, the participants, I feel like it's just beginning, right? Like this is just the first step. And so I really wanted to emphasize activities that you can do beyond LDTC. There's a lot you can do. You guys all had really great ideas about ways to really small scale revitalization projects that could snowball and could become bigger. And I think that's excellent. Record more stories, right? We talked about how to record, how to use recorders. Just create more recordings, just have that information, have that documentation. Whether or not you can transcribe it perfectly, having it is so good for your language. Work on your dictionary more. Just start, like Gigi said, start building words and start creating your own dictionary, just as much as you can think of, as much as you can dump in. Whether you analyze it perfectly, that's not as important as it is to get all the information out there into the world documented. And Henry was ahead of me. He had a really good idea to see who you can contact. Find out if there's linguists working in the area, or contact a cultural center, a community center. So build your resources, figure out who might be interested, because obviously, there's strength in numbers. So the more people who are committed to this project, the more people who can work together, you're going to be able to achieve so much more. So that was a final point. And lastly, if you're around next fall, take advanced LDTC. So we have an advanced course. As you know, you guys know probably some of the people who are in it, like Ismail, Zul, and Rahma. So for our advanced LDTC, it's much more based around what you guys want to learn. So this workshop is to kind of give you the core sort of 8 points we want to hit on. But then in advanced LDTC, you get to kind of decide how you want to spend your 8 weeks, what projects you want to work on more, what topics you want to delve into a little bit more. And it could be learning more about morphology, or it could be really starting to plan and make revitalization efforts. So I would encourage you, if you're around, to take it and to stay in touch with us. Please, we're going to send out a newsletter, hopefully pretty regularly. So sign up, stay in touch, let us know how you're doing, let us know what you're doing. We as LDTC and we as a department want to support you.